Welcome everyone for tuning in with us for the Elimin8Hate panel, Elevating Underrepresented Voices in Film and Television at the 24th Annual Vancouver Asian Film Festival. I'm Barbara Lee, founder and president of the festival. We begin by acknowledging that this broadcast is taking place on the unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. This panel series is sponsored by Creative BC, Telefilm Canada, Canadian Heritage, and TELUS Story Hive. First, I'd like to introduce moderator Elimin8Hate Patel. He's the former coordinator of diversity initiatives for the NFB, a former instructor in the Downtown East Side, and an award-winning filmmaker. Elimin8Hate Patel is a filmmaker of color who founded Roaming Pictures in 2001 to explore the stories of us all coming together. Throughout his 20 years in the film and television industry, he has worked on and for many diversity initiatives by publicly funded organizations, while also working as an instructor for projections, film and television for at-risk youth in the Downtown East Side for many years. The last decade has seen him continue to documentary filmmaking and training with different Indigenous groups in Northern Alberta, the far north, and BC. At this time, Elimin8Hate is continuing his ongoing twisted love affair with public financing for documentary, while using his history in film as a man of color to affect change in the film and television industries. Elimin8Hate is also an alumni of VAF. We've shown a few of his films over the years. I'd also, before Elimin8Hate comes on and introduces our great panel of guests, I want to thank all of VAF's team behind the scenes doing the tech. And if there's been a little bit of difficulties, we're all learning and we're all in this together. And I hope you really have a little bit of patience, and I hope you really enjoy the show because there's some awesome information that's going to be discussed tonight. So Elimin8Hate.
Hi, I'm Elimin8Hate Patel, so I'll be your moderator for tonight. Before I introduce the panelists and get them to tell you a bit more about themselves, which I know you all are here to hear, I'm just going to give a bit of an intro to set the tone for the evening. I would like to first myself acknowledge that we are having this panel on the unceded, ancestral, and occupied traditional lands of the Musqueam, the Tsleil-Waututh, the Stala, and the Squamish nations of the Coast Salish peoples. For myself, sometimes this acknowledgement seems routine and almost a euphemism or a nice way to get out of saying the truth, that this land was stolen from them. I would also like to say thank you to all of you for being here. I do know this is a very difficult time for all of us. And finally, I'd like to thank Barbara Lee and the whole VAF team and community who put together this panel, as well as taking a leadership role at this important time. So years ago, probably at least 10 years ago, I did a similar panel for VAF, Diversity in Filmmaking, or something like that it was called. At the time, we had 3 working directors of color from the industry. The panel was to explore the challenges for BIPOC persons in the film and TV industry from the perspective of visible minorities. Their answer to every question was essentially, you just work hard, and if you have the talent, you will get the jobs. It will happen. Essentially, it's a meritocracy. At that time, there was nothing good here in Vancouver, at least, that came talking about racism in your workplace. Take it from a guy who made films about racism. Sexism was a conversation that was being had and addressed to a point, but racism perhaps was too unsettling, too dangerous, or even foreign to acknowledge. I did not push them to speak in these terms. I believe then and now no BIPOC person should be made to talk about racism if they choose not to. That is our choice, it still is. I tell that story as that was then and this is now. I believe that this is a moment in time in the world, but definitely in the US of A and Canada, where there is acceptance that racism is systemic and impacts many, if not all, or parts of our lives, including the film and television industry, both above the line, below the line, and in the decision makers of the public and private systems that provide financing. With these panelists, we have the opportunity to not only learn about the programs they may offer or the positions they are in, but why they are still needed. Why is it important to have BIPOC people in decision-making roles in film and television? This is not a panel on racism, but a panel on the intersection of film and TV with BIPOC people, with panelists who undoubtedly have much to share. And with that, on to the intros. So first, I'd like to introduce Barbara Chirinos. She's the project leader in national promotion, Western Region, Ontario, and Nunavut. Prior to joining the team at Telefilm Canada, was the founder and co-curator of the Vancouver International Film Festival. Film Centre's Black History Month film series celebrating its 8th year in 2020. Barbara was a curating producer of for the Battered Women's Support Services event 40 years later, featuring Tarana Burke, founder of the #MeToo movement at Vancouver's Orpheum Theatre. She served as the executive producer of the Granville Island Cultural Society, gala producer, special events, and facility manager for VIF Van City Theatre, and managing director of the Vancouver Folk Music Festival. She co-founded with Mexican artist Ari de la Mora and produced the International Day of the Dead exhibit and tour on Granville Island. Barbara teaches festival management at Capilano University. And before making her home, she was an independent film producer and theatrical stage manager in hometown of New York City. So welcome, Barbara.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Hello, Nilesh. Hello to the esteemed members of the panel, and of course to the great team at VAF. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. And so I'm going to move on to introducing Maheen Ibrahim. Maheen is the Director of Multicultural Audience Engagement Market for the Walt Disney Studios. Maheen Ibrahim is currently overseeing its brand new short film incubator for underrepresented directors, Launchpad. She was previously at Refinery 29 in development production and spent the majority of her career at Google and YouTube, where she helped run production programs with an emphasis on diversity and inclusion at its flagship studio for YouTube creators. In addition, she writes creative nonfiction and holds an MFA in production from USC and a BA in Mass Communication and Business Administration from UC Berkeley.
Thank you so much, Nilesh, and a big thank you to my fellow panelists as well. Very happy to be here.
Thanks, we're glad you're here. Next, I'm going to introduce Nicole Mendez. She's the VP of Scripted Development at Lark Productions. Nicole Mendez oversees strategies and development for the scripted arm of the company. Previously, she spent over a decade working in scripted content at CBC. As executive in charge of production for CBC Drama, she oversaw projects in both production and development for dramatic one-hour series, limited series, mini-series, movies of the week, and specials including the hit Canadian drama Murdoch Mysteries, the acclaimed series Anne with an E, and the Peabody-nominated limited series The Book of Negroes. Nicole has served on multiple juries and sat on various industry panels for organizations such as TIFF, WGC, DGC, and WIFTT. She also serves on committees for POV and BIPOC TV and film, organizations that aim to increase inclusion and representation in the industry.
Thank you so much, Nilesh. Thank you for having me, VAF.
Thanks for coming. I'm glad you made it. She's, I think, out in Toronto, so she stayed up late to be here with all of us on the coast. And finally, I'm going to introduce Melanie Hadley. Melanie is an Ojibwe woman, originally from Winnipeg, Manitoba, and is currently based in Toronto, although she is in Winnipeg right now, I believe. She is currently the program director for Warner Media's Canadian initiatives, focused on building relationships with and opportunities for creators of all genders to build these identities from Canada's underrepresented communities, including members of Indigenous, Black, and other racialized groups, creators with disabilities, and members of the LGBTQ2+ and Francophone communities. Prior to her role at Warner Media, she was executive in charge of production for CBC Drama, overseeing projects and development and production, including Trickster, Heartland, Frankie Drake Mysteries, Pure, The Secret Path, and When It Calls the Heart. Before that, she was the manager of programming for Aboriginal People's Television Network, KPTN, where she managed development and first and second window licensing for television and digital media projects commissioned from Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, and the Northwest Territories. Growing up in an underrepresented community, she has a unique life experience to give her the drive, ambition, and perseverance to explore the power of change through storytelling. So welcome, Melanie.
Thank you. What a great group. I feel like I was lost in all the intros. Everyone sounds so amazing. I'm so happy to be included. Thank you,
Thanks for being here, Melanie. I'm not sure if Jason's here. Is anybody? Okay, I'm not sure if Jason's here. So I actually wanted to move on to, everybody's here to actually really know more about you and what you do. We'll start with Barbara. We'll go back to the start. Barbara, can you fill us in?
I certainly can, in terms of what I do now.
Yeah, and your background.
Because I've had lots of gigs, I'll tell you. I mean, you know, I think I'm just getting to know my other panelists here. And it's very possible that for you possibly have also had lots of gigs, but I have had lots of gigs since I've moved here, and also while I was in New York. I started off, believe it or not, working for an insurance company, but because of my love of film and love of storytelling, found my way into theater craft as a lighting tech and as a stage manager, and eventually transferred that to film, where I worked as an independent film producer for 11 years, creating films with my business partner, who was another Black woman. We made films for Sesame Street, our narratives, as well as a feature animation for public television. And then I moved to Vancouver in 2002, where right now, working for Telefilm Canada has actually brought all of the things that I have done together. So I feel as though I, in a way, created the path to essentially get me to the position where I am now. And I am a newbie at Telefilm. I started 6 months ago. As the project leader of national promotion, I oversee the funding for film festivals and other activities across Canada, where I oversee their funding applications, also providing resources and support for festivals, conferences, and other activities from Ontario and the rest of Canada, going from Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, BC, Nunavut, and I get an opportunity to actually see the applications that are submitted and get a chance to see what is happening across the country. So as a result of managing a festival, being a filmmaker for 11 years, attending film festivals, curating as well for the Black History Month film series, as well as curating a number of activities when it comes to storytelling here, I've had an opportunity to work with a number of wonderful artists, creators, and now, because I'm on the other side of the fence, hopefully be able to provide some realistic advice as well as support, because I've been on several sides of the storytelling genre format that happens to exist. So I am a person that really believes, and I've mentioned this to my esteemed colleagues, and I'm so impressed that I am able to sit on this panel with all of these wonderful people that are just so impressive, that collaboration is key. No matter what we're doing, no matter where we are, collaboration is the key, not only to survival on this planet, but also when it comes to the sustainability of arts and culture. Was that brief enough for you?
I could listen a lot more, but
yeah, but I want to hear from the others, because I'm sure I can learn a lot just by listening by the rest of my esteemed colleagues here.
Nice. Melanie, why don't you go? Yeah.
I thought I was going last.
Oh, sorry. I messed up the order already. Rookie move.
Yeah, it's so funny. Just recently, you know, when you kind of go from one position to another, you have this period of time right before you leave, where you take a look at your path and where you've been. And I had always categorized myself as somebody who had an unconventional career path. But then in examining my CV, I was like, oh, this is actually pretty, like, it's very clear that I've been, like, you know, essentially doing the same job. But just how I do it has evolved by where I've done it, where I've performed that job. The only thing that I think was maybe unconventional was my internal journey about it, because I did always think I was going to be a storyteller. I always thought that I had that little bit in me that could make me really vulnerable and share pieces of my heart and soul with a larger audience. And somewhere along the way, I realized, that's a special skill. That's a very special quality that I don't have. But I know I want to be involved in this industry. So I actually started very young. I was an actor as a kid, you know, some theater stuff, commercial stuff, never anything serious. Honestly, just enough money to, like, buy a bike, you know, things like that. And I was an actor, and I was on set for my first commercial, and there was all of these people there. And I was like, who are all of these other people? I had only been in theater at that time, so I didn't really know what behind the camera looked like. And it was, I think I was like 12, and basically was like, how do I get a job here? And at the time, Women's Television Network was based in Winnipeg, where I'm originally from, and I am now, but I live in Toronto. And they said, well, we're actually offering a girls' TV camp where you'll come and make a short film. And that's what planted in my head that I could be a filmmaker, realizing later that there's much more to it than just saying it so. But I started there and, did some things with WTN after that, as far as attending conferences with them, logging some tapes from time to time, went through high school after that, and then did the NSI's, at the time it was called the Aboriginal Youth Pilot Program. And it was sort of an amuse-bouche of all of the areas of the industry that you could have a job. So there was like a sound session, casting sessions, different sessions like that. And through that, got an internship at CBC, then went to APTN, then back to CBC, and ended up at Warner Media. And somewhere in between there, I realized that although I do love to tell stories, I don't think I have that special quality I mentioned, but I do think that the way that I'm serving creatives and the way that I serve, I think specifically underrepresented storytellers, is to be a bit of an usher to opportunity, or at least that's what I've tried to do. So much of my career, though, has often been the lonely only, which is a term I recently heard, and now I'm just going to steal it. It was from Effie Brown, and the only lonely in the room. And so in my time at CBC, I found that so much of my time there was really just figuring out the lay of the land, figuring out how a machine like that works. And then with, people like Nicole Mendez, Karen Sang, trying to figure out how do we get underrepresented storytellers in every sort of open window, back door. How do we connect really exciting storytellers with opportunity? So in my role with Warner Media, I'm doing that in a slightly different way. Warner Media has always had a presence in Canada. They do a lot of service production here, but there became an emphasis on how can we be tapping in, because there's world-class crews here, but how can we be tapping in to all the talent in Canada, whether it be above the line or below the line. So for the next few years, myself, Deanna Cadet, who serves as the executive director, and a few postings that we have up right now, which I would love to share, because one of them is based in Vancouver. We are going to be running a slew of initiatives that are going to be tapping in to underrepresented communities. The first one out of the gate that we had already lightly announced with the Academy of Film and TV here in Canada, or Cinema and Television, pardon me, is our writers program. That's going to be really focusing on some mid-tier writers. We have a director's one that's going to come out next year. There's just a nice bevy of initiatives that I'm excited to sort of tease a few out and talk a little bit more about sort of what's guiding a lot of those.
Thank you, Melanie. It's really exciting. Your story's exciting. I think Jason's here. Not here, but while he's getting in, I want to continue on with hearing your stories and more about you. So, Maheen, can we get some background, some verbs,
Sure,
adjectives?
all the things
nouns.
happening. I also shared with some of the panelists that I'm currently in Los Angeles, and I want to reiterate that if anyone here can help me get to Vancouver, please, anyone. I got the chance to visit in 2015, and I still dream about Stanley Park and all the amazing restaurants, and I'd love to go back, especially because tomorrow is our election day. So that's my PSA for tonight. So to tell you a little bit about me, so I'm on the diversity and inclusion team for the Walt Disney Studios, so where we make feature films. So I support some of our brands like Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, Pixar, Walt Disney Animation Studios, Disney Live Action. We also now get to work with Fox because of the Fox acquisition, so 20th Century, Searchlight, Blue Sky. And this is my first Hollywood job. I definitely was very unsure if I'd ever get to actually work in Hollywood. My parents are immigrants from Bangladesh, and they still have never seen a single Marvel movie. They do not watch any American movies or television unless it happens to be on the plane. And they're very proud to watch Bangla television and the news. So they were very anti and still are very anti-Hollywood and really against me going into this industry. So it took decades of me kind of trying to work on them and still having this hope. So for all of those brownies out there like me, you can do it. Just wear down your parents over decades. And so I kind of started my career in tech. So my parents are in the Bay Area and was kind of lucky to have tech in my backyard and really fell into a career working at Google and YouTube. And I really loved my experience there. And after Google acquired YouTube in 2005, I slowly tried to make my way into the entertainment side of things. And so that eventually got me down to Los Angeles, where I was able to get my master's in film and start to really build that expertise and craft to support creatives similar to Melanie. And I joined Disney to start our first kind of public-facing diversity and inclusion program for the studio side. It is a director's lab for 6 underrepresented directors to produce a short film produced by Disney Live Action, so the team that produced the live action remake of Lion King and Aladdin, and funded by Disney Plus for distribution on Disney Plus. We are in the midst of production, which has been extremely, extremely challenging during COVID time. So we wrap photography on short number 2 out of 6 tomorrow, so I'll be on set tomorrow. And the goal of the program is twofold. It's to create a pipeline for the studios and industry of amazing talent and support them in their vision artistically and train them in the studio process. So it's the first time they have a production office. They're doing a union short. The first time many of them have a location manager and a line producer. So kind of really putting them through the studio system model. The other cool thing about the program is each director is paired with creative executive mentors across our studios to give script notes, help with the HOD process, and provide notes on the cut, go on set. So that's been really amazing to see. I should say the program is for those who have the ability to work in the US. And so I know some people do have like dual citizenship and things like that. So just to let you know, we do have some directors who are on O1 artist visas, so 2 of our 6. And we hope to in the future have region-specific programs as well. Someone from Disney Canada actually contacted me yesterday. So excited over the weekend to be like, I want a launch pad in Canada. So maybe that'll be my ticket to move to Vancouver.
Well, I think we'd all be happy if that worked out up here. The program and you. Okay. So, Nicole, you're up. Let's hear.
I'm here. Hi. Okay. I feel like Mel did a bit of introing or talking about me, so maybe I don't have to talk too much about
No.
You know, it's funny, similar to other people, I didn't know what I was going to do, and I had a job as a legal administrative assistant, which was super boring. And I remember thinking I was going to try and like go to law school, and I remember trying to read case law and just thinking, oh, could someone just like give me a narrative? Like, I don't understand what any of this means. I need a story. And I always loved television. So I ended up going back to school to figure out how to work in television because I didn't know, you know, my parents also immigrated here from Africa, and we just, you know, wasn't a job that people had. So I went to school, figured it out, ended up at the CBC, where I spent over a decade working in drama with Mel Hadley, some years over there. And I recently left. I just started a new job at the beginning of the month at Lark Productions, running their scripted department. So yeah, you know, I mean, I've just always sort of been looking to see those voices on TV that reflect my experience, and that's always been a huge part of me and how I operate in my job. And one of the ways that I've really tried to bolster that is I joined BIPOC TV and Film's Visioning Committee about 2 years ago. And BIPOC TV and Film is a grassroots organization. It's volunteer run. I have a lot of notes here because there's so much stuff that we're doing and I'm going to forget half of it. But, you know, we are an organization that aims at increasing representation of Black, Indigenous, and people of color in front of and behind the camera. We do that through a couple of things. There's education, so we put on panels. We just did a directing for commercials panel, but we also have a Trickster watch party going on. So Trickster on CBC and now on the CW for my American friends on the panel is, you know, the first Indigenous show on, Indigenous-led and created show on the national broadcaster. And they're doing, BIPOC TV and Film is doing a weekly watch party where we do panels after with Q&As with the cast and crew. So that's been amazing. We also did an art department panel. I mean, this is all just within the last month. Like, this organization does so much. There's also the advocacy side of things. So the visioning committee members sit on different panels, different working groups for different organizations, including Telefilm. We also work with the Racial Equity Media Coalition, as well as the ISO and the Black Screen Office, the newly created Black Screen Office. We also do initiatives. So we had a software for Black Screenwriters Initiative that we ran over the summer, which saw giving away 200 copies of Final Draft and 200 copies of Movie Magic. So like 400 copies of screenwriting software into the hands of Black screenwriters, because we all know that that is a huge barrier for getting into the industry, is having that screenwriter software. We also have the Real Work initiative going on right now, or the short film grant that I think that just wrapped up. And so the jury is sitting right now and deliberating, and they're gonna give away some money for people to make some short films. As well as the Solidarity Fund that we did with the ISO and REMC as well. And then there's Higher BIPOC, which is the database, which is for BIPOC creatives, for both key creatives and for crew. And we just recently announced that we hit 3,500 signups, and that's since launching October 5th. And so all 4 of the Canadian broadcasters are on board. There's also a lot of community partners as well, including the Vancouver Asian Film Festival. So I think I'll stop there.
Okay. Thank you. That's a lot to know. That's the Higher BIPOCs. Yeah, it's very important. It's nice to have something to sort of help those who are really looking right now to diversify. Jason's here. Hi, Jason.
Hi, so sorry I'm late. I was having some computer issues, but glad to be with you all.
So Jason, I'm just going to do your brief intro, and then if you can give us some background on yourself and your company. Yeah, so this is Jason V, VP of Artist Partnerships at 88 Rising. Jason is the VP of Artist Partnerships at 88 Rising, the leading record label and media company that manages Asian artists around the world. Jason is a leader in the music and tech industry and was previously head of business development at Deezer, a global music streaming service. Jason has also held leadership roles at leading tech and media companies, including Google, Viacom, and Disney. Oh, 2 Disney. Okay, a graduate of the NYU Stern School of Business, Jason is passionate about rising entrepreneurs and has a consulting company, JV Media Ventures, to consult, advise, and invest in startups with founders from underrepresented communities. Welcome, Jason.
Thanks so much. And Maheen, I feel like we've never met, but we're like ships sailing in the night. So thanks so much for having me. Yeah, I'd love to just, I could talk a little bit about how I got to where I am today, and also why I'm so excited about this panel. As you know, kind of elevating underrepresented voices is core to what I want to see more of, and also like what we currently do at 88 Rising. How I actually got to where I am, and today it started with an American Idol audition. I started off my career on Wall Street in investment banking after graduating from NYU. But during the time in Wall Street, I realized I just had this big passion from music and couldn't ignore it. So much so that when the Idol auditions were in town, I went to the stadium full of 25,000 people. It was my first audition ever, and I completely flopped it, and it went miserably. But it was such a pivotal moment, actually, when I look back in my career, because I left that failed audition, but realizing I had this passion for changing the music industry and doing all these things within it that led me to that place. And realizing that while I may not be the most amazing singer, but I had also this frequency or in being able to succeed in business. So merging the two was essentially what I set out to do after leaving that audition. So since then, I worked on Disney's Broadway shows doing strategy. That was kind of my big break after Wall Street and that epiphany from American Idol. Post Disney, then went into the TV side of the business, doing strategy at Viacom for Nickelodeon. And those experiences were certainly very, very interesting in traditional media. And I think I was very fortunate that Google came knocking on my door, and that was a great way to be able to then really understand what was really affecting these traditional media businesses, which was essentially digital media and YouTube and everything that was happening there. So I would spend almost 4 years at Google working on music partnerships in the ad tech space. Then just kind of continue on that thread of just having this interest in the music space. Ended up in a role overseeing business development at Deezer. Deezer's the top music streaming service in France and also quite popular in Latin America. And I was based in Miami for that role. While I was at Deezer, what's interesting is I oftentimes, and also throughout my career, I would find myself being the only Asian person in the room. And especially when I looked to the leadership ranks, there wasn't a lot of Asian representation. And at the same time, I think what's interesting during my time at Deezer was I started to see all these, a few Asian artists that would pop up in our top playlists on Deezer. First seeing Joji, who's Japanese, and I saw that he was signed by 88 Rising. Then I saw Nikki, who's Indonesian, was signed by 88 Rising. To be frank, even a couple years ago, I have not heard of 88 Rising before, but seeing that there was all these Asian artists being represented by one label and working in music, I became super, super curious. So I actually just reached out to 88 Rising and sent a cold note introducing myself, for working in music, and was really curious about what they were doing. And a couple of conversations later, ended up landing a role heading up our artist partnerships at 88 Rising. And it's been really great, I would say, in the last year. If you're not familiar with what we do at 88 Rising, our mission is to essentially address the misrepresentation and underrepresentation of Asian artists in the global music industry. And it started about 5 years ago, kind of having this record label that represents Asian artists, but also now spawning into events where we have our own music festival. We have a merchandise division where we've done collaborations with other brands. And we also have a media platform of being able to provide inventory to brands to be able to work with our talent. And yeah, it's been a really fun ride, and I'm excited about this conversation because core to what we do is elevating underrepresented voices, which is essentially every artist on our roster that's been rejected by the major labels, probably because of their race. And we're really excited, I think, to be able to now have this global platform for Asian voices.
Fantastic. It's really exciting. I checked out your guys' your website and the Wikipedia. It's amazing all that's going on. It's one of the good things I like about what BAP's done here is I'm learning so much myself. And I think everybody watching is what's actually out there, because it's easy to be disconnected from all that's going on. So it's nice to have this platform and panel. If anybody out there has questions, you can just send them on in. But I have some questions. I actually wanted to sort of talk about, like, I know some of you have probably been in diversity programs or underrepresented programs, or maybe you're running them now, like a Launchpad, or maybe I don't know. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what do you think are the, you know, what should you be looking to get out of these sort of programs? Like, a lot of them have outcomes, like you make a film, okay, and mentorship. I'd like to talk. You could talk about the value of that, but also maybe if you're in these programs, what else should you be doing other than the goals that are stated, like making a film, that you think would really help you? Because when you're given access, it's a chance to meet and all that. But anyways, I want to hear from you about all the intangibles that maybe can help people if they get access to these programs. Does anybody want to speak to that?
Sure. I'll go.
Great.
It's interesting because I did also take one of those programs, and somebody we had to do those daily pitches every day where every time a new presenter comes in, we pitch ourselves or we pitch whatever project it was like at the end, there was going to be a pitch competition, and then one of those projects would get made with all the people who were in the course. But like halfway through it, somebody came in and they were like, oh, well, it's actually not about this project that I know you're putting all your eggs in this basket. It's more about, like, you should just know the people that are coming in. You have all this amazing faculty coming in, like, you're not going to have this opportunity with them again. And that locked away in my brain for, I think, like 12 years before it finally, like, clicked in, where I was like, oh my God, like, projects will come and go, but the relationship stays forever. So I think, although there are often deliverables, although there are often, like, tangible outcomes to any initiative that you're part of, I think it's also about relationship building. Because if you look at all of these people that, let's just say, like, have a show in Canada, the likeliness is that they pitched hundreds of shows before that became the show. What got them in the room for those 100 pitches was having a relationship with the gatekeepers or with those people who are shepherding people in. So I really think it's as much about pitching as it is about building sustainable relationships in the industry.
Yeah, I agree. That's the real thing, is being able to get access to actually pitch, and that comes from relationships, and not necessarily just from the great ideas. Anybody else? Me? On the spot.
Oh, Melanie, that's such a good answer.
That's why I went first. I've had it.
Oh, I thought that was so great. I kind of try to think of also other tactical things. I know for us, it was a way for the directors to get representation as well. And many of them kind of came from film school. So that's also very helpful. And in this program, we have a first look deal with them. And it helps for them to also be working on a writing sample. Unfortunately, with the burden of kind of being an auteur, it seems, where you're a writer-director, so being able to self-generate material is to your advantage to kind of keep the momentum going. And so for them coming out of the program, having a sample that they've worked on or a project they're looking to develop kind of already takes away the next step. So executives don't have to, like, think about and brainstorm, and they don't have the time to do that. The directors are kind of shepherding their own career. So I'd say those two things: self-generating material and a chance to get representation if you already don't have those avenues through relationships.
Thank you. Barbara, any thoughts?
Oh, so many.
We gotta get Barbara back in here.
Generally, what I think is really important to know is, when it comes to filmmaking, storytelling, there's so many skills that a person or team is essentially supposed to have. The term that I think a lot of people actually forget is show business. It is about the business of show. you know, if you are a person who is left brain, right brain, and you can essentially do everything, you can, because there are the people who are out there who can write, produce, direct, star in their own film, come up with a budget, come up with expanding their networks. But the majority of us are not all of those things. The majority of us are really good at a number of things. And what I think is also important is I'll come back to the collaboration, and I'll also come back to partnership. There are a number of significant relationships where you'll see, for example, I'll bring up the filmmaker Clement Virgo. Clement Virgo has been in a business relationship. He is a creative, he is a film director, but he has had a business partner by the name of Damon D'Oliveira, who is one of the people who has provided feedback to Telefilm for the creation of the Black Screen Office. Damon, along with Jennifer Holness, who is an African-Canadian producer, just to say that, of course, she's Black, but to say that Damon and Clement have been working together for, I think, close to 20 years, where Clement essentially does the creative portion and Damon is there as the producer, where they have worked together to keep pumping out projects. It is important that people can actually come together, continue to expand your networks, continue to learn your craft, whichever side of the coin you happen to be as a storyteller. If you are the creative piece, or you are the person who is looking after the budgets, looking for your attorneys, looking for the contracts, looking for the templates, looking for resources, so that your partner can go out and just focus on the creative part, so that those two pieces can come together so you can continue to have projects. I think it is important that a number of filmmakers, storytellers know that when you try to take on everything, it's not that it isn't possible, it's just that sometimes it can make things a lot more difficult. So what I have learned, and what has worked for me and has worked for a number of people that I see that are in the industry, as we continue to chug along and to make projects happen, is increasing your networks. Also, continuing to learn more about your craft. As I've mentioned, whether it's left brain or right brain. Also, each one teach one. It's interesting what Jason said. I actually took film courses at NYU. I lived right around the corner from Cooper Union. So I lived down there, and I took a night course. And in that night course, I'd say there were 100 people in the course. I'd say 95 of them were white men. 3 were white women, me, and a Latino sister. And, you know, a lot of the conversations that were taking place, we were just not even really paid attention to whatsoever in this class. But I knew at the time, because I worked in insurance, knowing that networking is important. So continuing to network, expanding your networks, expanding your resources, continuing to learn your craft, and to look for a partner that you can work with so that you can continue to have these projects move out, or at least created. Somebody's going to pitch it while somebody is continuing to create them, because we cannot do everything all the time together. And filmmaking and storytelling is one of the most intense formats of art, because so many people have input into what is taking place on the screen, if you can get it on the screen. So each one teach one. That's, you know, instead of holding on to as much information as possible because you're afraid somebody's going to steal your idea, you know, maybe don't give the specific idea if you don't want someone to take it, but everything else in terms of where you go to get the best rate when it comes to, you know, transferring the DCP, possibly where's the best place if you want to screen your film. Where do you do that? Or what about the programs that a number of public funders, just like Telefilm, what do they have going on? So to continue to share that information with people that you are bringing into your network, because the more you share, the more they're going to share. And we have to take care of each other, particularly as people of color in this industry. We got to be real about what's going on out there, and that we have to work really hard to get our stories, which are so important to us, but so important to the world, because all of our people have been creating since the dawn of time. And we need to find out about these stories, not only for ourselves so that we can enrich our hearts and our minds, but for our children, so that we can see ourselves and remind ourselves that we're here, that we're important, and we ain't going anywhere. So
Thanks, Barbara.
You're welcome.
We have a question from the audience, and it's similar to what I've come up with, so I'm gonna read them both.
Okay.
Is there a strategy that worked for you in getting your first job on set? This is from Amy Wood. What did you do to get noticed from a pile of applicants? And then my version of it is, what are some of the challenges you think to hiring more BIPOC people? It's not like as BIPOC people that we learn to make films and TV differently. Like we are going to show up on set with an orange and call that a camera. It's like we know how to do these things. So what she's asking Amy is like, what's your strategies for getting your first job on set? And what you did to get noticed from a pile of other applicants? And Nicole, why don't we go to you?
This is where I have to confess that I've never had a job on set.
Oh.
I've actually always been an office person, but I mean, the one thing I will say is I was working at a small broadcaster, and my contract ended, and I just didn't know what I was going to do next, and I was really kind of panicking. So I think I just went through like my Rolodex. It was an actual Rolodex because we still had business cards, and I was going through like all of the business cards that I had accumulated over going to festivals and people who had come into that broadcaster who I'd met, and I literally emailed everybody. Like I just emailed everybody that I knew and was like, hey, I'm looking for the next thing. Like, my contract's ended, this is what I'm interested in. And I just feel like I think I got one email back from someone, and it was a former teacher of mine. And she was like, you know what? I know something. Send me your resume. I'm like, sure, here's my resume. What's the job? Like I had no idea. I was just like, here's take my resume. And it ended up, she knew someone who was looking for an assistant at CBC. And so that's how I ended up working at CBC. So again, it was just one of those things of like, just sort of being a little shameless in terms of how you're contacting people and who you're contacting. I mean, obviously you're doing it in a polite way, but it really was casting as wide a net as possible, because you just never know, where that opportunity, which connection is going to work out for you, where that opportunity is going to come from.
Totally.
I'm just going to go on to another question from Kai White. What do you think the creative industry educational programs need to be doing to ensure that underrepresented voices can access the education and be supported in the programs? Jason, if you have any thoughts on this? Oh.
Interesting about this certainly it's a weird time for everyone, but I think it also can result in some opportunities in terms of potentially democratizing access. I mean, even this very panel that I'm on, I don't think I would ever have been invited to the Vancouver Film Festival, being based in New York, and it's so cool that we can do this. So our location actually doesn't matter that much anymore. So for educational programs, there are so many that's actually now moving to remote only. So maybe there were in LA, which is the home of so many movie studios. There's actually this, like, for example, the CAPE program. It's an amazing fellowship program for Asians kind of rising in the industry, and you get to be mentored by various folks. In the past, you had to be in LA to be able to participate in that program. And their applications really kind of took anyone from different places in the US or the world now, given that the location doesn't really matter anymore, right? And all the sessions have gone virtual. So I think for someone kind of wanting to access these various education programs, potentially maybe even look at some that could have been a barrier because of its location, and it's possible that you can now take that type of education or program virtually. And also I would say something else that I kind of seen from just a networking perspective or being able to learn from others, we were also seeing a little bit of this element of being able to connect with others virtually. I think you may find maybe someone that you are trying to meet, in person at some Vancouver networking event. Now we know everyone's at home. So potentially there could be a way that you can try tapping into folks virtually, as people may tend to be more offering, of their time and being able to share.
Great. Thank you. I want to actually follow this question with a lot of programs, a lot of initiatives are really geared towards the creatives, directors, the artists. And we were just talking about business, right? And Barbara is talking about that. And I think that's an important thing that that needs to be addressed, is like, how do you think we can help producers get more producers of color, more BIPOC producers and decision makers? Since there are programs, but it definitely, for me, that is the ceiling. Like, there's definitely, we've seen more programs in the creating of our stories, but a lot of the businesses aren't as developed through these programs. I'm wondering if you guys could speak to what you think about that, and how you think that could be done, or any advice you have.
I mean, I can just say, I think it's a two-way street. We talk so much about underrepresented storytellers or people who from underrepresented communities gaining skills and developing and and I just think or there could be more accountability on the decision makers for equity training. I think that the underrepresented communities are doing so much work to close the gap. And I think right now, the state of the world and this racial reckoning that's happening is there's a bit of a shift happening, and there's an onus on the actual decision makers and gatekeepers to be training themselves. So if there's anything I can say to the, underrepresented communities, it's that I think it's about being patient with that change, but also doing what you can to continue to stimulate it. I think if we're talking about how do we get more underrepresented producers, I think it's also about finding allies that are independent producers. Earlier, it felt like we were talking a little bit about reciprocity in training programs. I think Barb was mentioning it a little bit about that information sharing and building partnerships. And I think that's really, really valuable to do within the community, but I think it's also valuable to do with allies as well. And now just seems like we're at a cusp of, this moment happening that I think you referred to, Nilesh. And it's about, we're in this moment right now, and now is the time to really start to build those connections. I think for anybody though that wants to be a producer, Brian Hamilton from Omni out in BC told me once that it's like you believe in magic and you have to make everybody else believe in it too. And sometimes people aren't interested in it, aren't interested in knowing how the trick works. So it's also know that it's really, really grueling. And I think that we hear all these really sort of impressive stories of somebody getting their show, or they're getting their show ordered, or they produced or made all these great movies and things like that. And we don't actually, those people aren't really talking about the valley of no's and heartbreak along the way. So I think it's there's a lot of uncovering and a lot of discovery that can happen. But I think that we are at that moment right now where we could be finding ourselves in a completely different industry in a few years if we seize this and really build meaningful connections.
Yeah, I think that's really what it is just right here, right now, it's really bringing together a lot of people with common goals, and really building off that. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? What's, in general, I think it's really about, building off of what Melanie just said, is if this moment is different, for yourselves, and I think I'd like all of you to take a stab at answering this, is what makes this moment feel different to you? I know for myself, was in many diversity initiatives, but they're pretty ended. Like, they were just initiatives and then you got out the door. But I feel that, I do feel this time is different. And if you do as well, what do you think makes it different right now? That sense.
I mean, I feel the fact that we're still talking about it, months later. I think back in June, everybody was really fearful that this moment was going to pass, and we really had to seize it. But, it's November. I was going to say it was October. It's November now, and, we're still having these conversations. And I think the difference that I'm seeing now is all of these organizations really trying to have meaningful consultations with the groups that they're trying to, with these underrepresented groups, the groups that they're trying to target in terms of these initiatives. And I think that feels really different. And it also feels like people are taking the time to make sure that these initiatives are sort of long serving, and that the goals are just kind of not, one and done. And then, okay, we did our job and, wash our hands of it. I feel like the conversations that are happening now are really aimed at making sure that, we're getting people in the door, but we're also creating those support systems to keep people, making films, making TV, and really, having a long career, and not just kind of, burning out after you've done one program, or, you had one job and then you hit the glass ceiling.
Maheen, what do you think? This is like, you're in the States, like we're in Canada, right? Does this feel different for your industry down there?
Yeah, I think some of it starts with language. So people are much more mindful that this is an uprising here in California and the nation, and not a riot, which is the language used in, say, the Rodney King riots, for example. So even some of the language and vocabulary is changing. I live in the Valley, where we have an outdoor mall a few blocks away, and they have been protesting every single day since June. So 6 months of daily protesting, holding up signs, which has been phenomenal and amazing to see. And I think there's just been a much more larger awareness from white people regarding white supremacy. We're starting to use the term white supremacy in corporate America for the first time, which has never been in the history of my 15 years of working in corporate America, and white privilege. And those are, again, the vocabulary is starting to change, which I think is really great. What we've been trying to do is to really make sure that that turns into action, and that there are tangible goals coming out of all that vocabulary. So that's still something that we're continuing to work on. Yeah,
there's definitely been a lot of people with way more language around race in my everyday life, and it's neat to see. But the action is, it's got to follow, right? Words are words. We're looking for action. Jason, like you are part of an Asian American agency company. Like, from that perspective, like, you guys are already doing this work. How have things been different for you guys? Like, you folks? Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say our business and just mindset was completely flipped on its head. I joined 88 Rising at the end of last year, and one of the big projects I was working on is our Coachella program. We were invited to be the first record label headliner at Coachella, and we were creating, essentially, with Coachella, the most Asian representation at the festival. COVID happened and everything was canceled. And at that time, we were all looking in the room, because live events is a core business model of ours. And at the same time, we're also seeing this rise of racism really reaching to its highest levels ever in America. And you have this just connection of what it means to be Asian in the US and people not being proud of it. So I think a lot of people actually were looking to us to either respond, or especially being an Asian American company. And I would say that, at first there was this, like everyone else, we felt also this impact on us. Like I felt racism in the US. All my colleagues, many of them who are Asian American, felt it. And it's first like getting over that shock of realizing we're in this together. And then the next moment was actually banding together to figure out what we can do. And I would say we actually felt a lot of inspiration from the Black Lives Matter movement, because I think what kind of happened to George Floyd, you saw the Black community immediately kind of get together and respond holistically. I think the Asian community is different because we are 20 plus different minorities in each, and we don't necessarily all relate to one another. So I think it was first kind of getting over that challenge. And I think one element that we kind of activated on as an action element is, as a music company, we were doing a lot of live events. We decided to pivot to virtual. So we ended up putting together a virtual festival featuring 24 Asian musicians from around the world this past May. I would say my expectations honestly was more tepid and lower because of the racism, and I don't know if everyone wanted to see this interface festival with just all Asian faces when there was this type of rhetoric. But I was quite astounded by the humanity that we still have. We had 8.5 million people tune in to our virtual festival. It was mind-blowingly successful. And I think it just kind of spoke to, a lot of the comments that we saw on Twitter was, thanks so much for doing this, or just kind of doing this during a time when I'm feeling the racism in my community. So I think people kind of took inspiration from that. And I think it also made me realize the power of music, because it is this universal language, whether we had musicians from Taiwan or here, just being able to kind of use that to, I think, feel change and at least a positive conversation.
Yes, for sure. Like it sounds like there's just a lot going on.
If I can mention something.
Yeah, we need to hear from you, Barbara.
Sorry. No worries. Thank you so much. And I am agreeing with everything that everyone is saying. What I will always bring into it is because I wear a producer's hat and have for a very long time. And it's the way that I sort of approach quite a number of the projects and the collaborations that I've done. And what we also have to keep in mind, we have to keep up the fight. This fight has been going on for a long time. As long as we have existed and we've wanted our stories to be shared, because we noticed that there was no representation for us, it is a fight that has continued to happen, and it's got to keep happening. And because we have a lot of momentum right now as a result of what's taking place on the planet, in the United States and in Canada. But what we also have to keep in mind is the business part of it. And that's why I bring up the producer's hat. There was a recent article, October 5th, and I just wrote it down in my notes, that I shared with a number of people, that was in the Los Angeles Times. And the title of that article, please, if you have an opportunity to get it, please do. The title of the article is "Viewer Demand for TV Shows with Diverse Casts Outstrips Supply," which essentially means, as I'm sure all of you already know, that there are lots of people that want to see stories that come from our communities. Not only to mention our communities, of course, because we all want to see ourselves represented on the screens and on billboards and in magazines. We all want to see that. That's one of the things that actually made me create the Black History Month film series for the Vancouver International Film Festival, because I grew up in a city where I saw people of color every single day. And then I moved to Vancouver, and when I would watch TV, sometimes a corny commercial would come on and I would see a Black woman on it, and it didn't matter what she was selling. I was just so happy to see her, to remind myself of my importance on this planet. So what is important in terms of the business part of it is investors want facts. That's why I say, in terms of partnerships, the content creator, the person that actually is creating the creative portion, partnered with a person who can get facts to present to an investor and or public funders, and it is getting information such as what was written in the LA Times, because it provides a justification that they are going to get either a return on their investment if they are investors, or for public funders to know that they are heading in the right direction. There is a huge demand, and that is in the States from the LA Times, but I do not believe that Canada is far behind, because our country is so, I hate to use the word multicultural, but it's true. I mean, I only say that only because that term multicultural has been used generically as a brand to get people to, jump into a program or whatever, but it aptly describes what happens when it comes to underrepresented voices and communities. There are numbers in our favor so that it can be justified to investors that them investing in our stories with people that look like us, written and created and produced by people that look like us, will provide a return on their investment. So I will go back to the business portion of it. It's, just keep that in mind. October 5th, LA Times, and it does have a study as well, so that you can use that and do some, oh, perfect, there it is, and use that for your own presentations when it comes to looking for an investor, and or if you are writing a grant, use that information. It would only bolster what you're doing. Thank you for putting up the link.
Thanks, Barbara. That's really important information. Just a quick follow-up. I get your brief thoughts, Barbara. Do you feel at Telefilm this is a different moment?
You know what? I really, really do. I really do feel as if it's a different time. If I can be, I actually was surprised that they hired me, to be perfectly honest. And I say that because after I left Granville Island, I applied for so many jobs. And I was so surprised. I really was surprised that no one was calling me. And I'm not saying that to say I'm all souped up and I'm all of that. I'm not saying that, but the number of places that I applied to across the country, when I saw who they hired instead of me, considering, all the things that I had done, the shows that I've done, the collaborations that I've worked with, the filmmakers, all of those. And I'm like, really? And my husband has really, helped me through that, because he said, you know what, it's probably a good thing you didn't go there, because if they didn't hire you, you would probably be trying to constantly justify your position and who you are. So I was surprised when Telefilm Canada hired me. And I really do feel as if I found my place. They listen to what I say, and I found out about a number of initiatives that had started prior to me coming there. There is, right now, there is the $100,000 that they are investing in the Black Screening Office. There's also the investment that they've put into the Indigenous Screen Office. There is the stream for racialized persons, for people of color, for development of film projects. There's the Talent to Watch project, a program that has its issues. It's got some issues that need to be worked out, but the people at Telefilm Canada, I'm finding, are willing to find out what those problems are and to work that out, because it is important for us to have stories that are made and represented by the rest of us that have not had an opportunity to have our stories told. And after we get in the mix, the stories have to continue happening. It's not like, okay, now all of a sudden you've got Indigenous, Black, Asian filmmakers, and now we got a group, and now we can stop and move on to whatever the next priority happens to be. No, these are projects that are providing a foundation, and they're moving on. And it was really, really enheartening to me when I started working here and finding out that all of these projects were being worked on prior to me arriving at Telefilm Canada. And at the same time, there's a partnership that Telefilm has initiated with Being Black in Canada program with Netflix, and also with the Academy and Warner Media. So yeah, there's a lot going on at Telefilm Canada.
Thanks. That's a lot of great info, and yeah, time will tell for sure.
Yeah, time will tell. Yeah. Oh yeah, and I'm not shy. So
yeah, there are some audience questions, so I'll make sure we get to these. This is from Nina Minifi. Do you think producers have integrity and responsibility to handle IP, especially the nuance and complex relation to Indigenous IP, especially in BC with the strictest Indigenous laws in the world? It's why I'm a producer. Does anybody?
I mean, of course, of course they do. If you haven't read the Pathways and Protocols document that the Indigenous Screen Office put out last year or 2 years ago, maybe?
Yeah.
Last year.
A year and a half ago, yeah.
Anyway, it's on the ISO's website. If you haven't read the document, like, please go and read that document. And that is absolutely, it's like no story about us, not us, about us without us, I think is the most powerful takeaway that you can get from that document. And it really has a lot of good guidelines and suggestions for working with Indigenous creators and content.
Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Well, and I think just further to that, like if a producer doesn't have knowledge of that, that's like a huge red flag. I think that there are still like a lot of producers who have an interest in telling Indigenous stories who haven't done basic homework. And I think that if you're an Indigenous person that they're coming to engage with them, you can smell them a mile away. Like, I just think that now there's so many resources out there and allies and people who, you know, I think are aware of what's historically been happening and trying to rectify that. They've done their homework and you can smell it, but you know what I mean? So I think that to answer your question, there's resources out there for them, but it's sort of up to the person to trust your gut in those scenarios when you're engaging with these independent producers, because if they don't have the basics, then they might not be the right sort of partner for you.
For sure. I think that'll probably become part of the new procedures for creatives, is to use the smell test whenever possible around a producer. If they don't smell right, onwards. We have one more question. It's from somebody named Barb Lee. Are there ways to make connections that are long-lasting and not one film and done? What's the best way to get diverse showrunners on shows? Music by diverse Asian musicians synced into the films and television, so it's, you know, it's all coming together, the pipelines. Jason, yeah, how about your thoughts on that with the music and the films, like really exposing it through film, the other artists of minority artists that have works? Yeah, the combo.
Yeah, it still takes, I would say, you know, a lot of education, and you know, I think on both sides. So, you know, while you may think that you know, there's the prevalence of K-pop that's happened, which I think has been great in the industry, but you know, K-pop is not the only genre when it comes to Asian music. So if it's a film project that wants diverse talent and they're thinking that only K-pop would represent Asian music, like that could be an issue in itself. So I think everyone needs to take a a broader perspective when it comes to diversity. And I think for, if you're on the artist side, or you're working from a creative standpoint, you're trying to get your music into the film, it takes, I think, just taking a step back to discuss kind of like the creative project. And it may oftentimes require, I think, breaking down some of the barriers or the stereotypes that still really exist within the music and entertainment industry. And I think from the film side, when you're looking for music or the sync possibilities, things like that, I think it is taking a more like open perspective, and also really being mindful of having diverse types of projects that you're featuring, because based on what Barbara just mentioned and the link that everyone just viewed, that really goes across the spectrum for entertainment. People want to be able to, see stories that are being told from a diverse perspective. And that goes down to the music that they're hearing from perhaps an artist that is underrepresented, from the people that's working behind the set to put this project together. And, you also see with Mulan, I really actually enjoyed that movie, but then you saw there's a lot of conversation around like, for telling a more authentic story, could there have been some folks behind the scenes that could have represented the story better? So I think there is now a really big push to make sure that we see more diversity, because it's not just for the sake of the storytelling. The audience wants and demands it. Nilesh, I think you're muted.
Rookie mistake again. Okay. Have any of you worked with brands as part of your work? If so, what do you look for in a brand? It's from Kristen Ruby. Maheen?
I have not.
This is a great question. So we currently don't work with a brand for Launchpad, for example, but we have been approached by brands in the past, and also for future seasons. And I think one big thing we look for is authenticity. So in our own allyship training, we talk about performative activism and how that's been kind of the first go-to for brands. So really doing a 360 assessment of why the brand is interested. Is it a fad? Is it something that's been longstanding and part of their mission? Is this genuine? Have they had past mishaps? Can we trust them? So trust and authenticity are the foundation of inclusion work. So far we haven't worked with brands, also because these are Disney Plus originals. So for that reason too. But those are things we look at and assess, and especially looking at all of their social media for that reason too. But those are things we look at.
Oh, sorry, there's feedback. Has anybody else got any working with brands, part of your work, how it influenced the productions?
No.
Okay. So we are nearing the end of the panel. I did want to just sort of bring it back to, where we're coming from as people of color, Black, Indigenous. And just maybe on a personal sense, like, how has that affected you, in this arena, in this work? There's, what have you drawn from it to get to where you are, and any words that you have to provide to the others, especially younger, looking to make it and knowing those challenges and hurdles might be in front of them? Nicole. You can't hide, right?
Please don't start with me. That's too.
Don't start with me eyes.
I mean, so speaking on behalf of BIPOC TV and film, the organization has really grown, like in the last couple of months, from being grassroots to becoming national, and getting involved a lot more on the advocacy side. We sort of joke about pre-pandemic, like we put on these panels and it would be, we'd do one once a month. And I mean, the one benefit, I hate to even say the word benefit, but an opportunity from this pandemic has been that all of our programming is now available to everyone. We did an initiative called Mentorship Mondays, and we had someone, we paired mentors with mentees. And we had someone Skype in from Morocco. Like, it's been pretty incredible. I mean, words of advice is trust your instincts, be kind to yourself. It's getting better, but we all know it's not easy. As Mel said, to be sometimes the only lonely, but hopefully you're not going to be the only person in the room who is BIPOC. I just would say, just find your community and find that support, because personally, like, that has been incredibly beneficial for me. You're on mute, Mel, if you're saying something.
Not just me.
Still on mute.
Oh,
God, I was saying I was on mute because I was getting tea delivered.
oh,
to
very
me.
nice.
Anyways, I want to add to Nicole's, because I feel like when I said only lonely, that is really how I felt when I first got to CBC. But then immediately sort of made connections with Nicole, with Karen, sang with Melly Fan, and sort of found this group of BIPOC people, underrepresented people. And although they weren't Indigenous, we found similarities in our plight. So if there's any advice I would give, it's similar to what Nicole's saying. It is find those people, but also be generous with those people and information share. I feel like we've all sort of said that in slightly different ways, but if we're information sharing, we're also protecting ourselves and each other from making, unnecessary mistakes. I think, in my time at CBC, although it was really extremely rewarding, and I still believe in CBC in so many ways, it was really like challenging, and it took a lot out of me, because I was an Indigenous woman in a space where there are no other Indigenous people then or ever before me. I ended up going into different meetings that were outside of my daily work as a drama exec. And I was, sort of happy to do it because I was gaining a lot of information. But at some point it turned and I was like, wait a second. I don't know if now I feel like I'm just like, maybe like feeling that burden of diversity. Like maybe this isn't beneficial for everybody. So I think it is information sharing, that support system. And it's also like, recognizing when you're maybe not gaining from a situation. It's so hard for us all to not be yes men. We have this thing ingrained in us that everyone, like, they're going to take a chance on me, so I have to say yes or something. And it's like, that is a great thing to have. Having, like, being down for like any job, no job too big, no job too small, great quality. Honestly, probably something that has enriched my career greatly. But it is like a very slippery slope into being taken advantage of. So just trying to find that measure, trying to find that balance is, I think, once you figure it out, you will save your energy only for worthy purposes that serve you and somebody else, right? Like, it's not going to be just serving somebody else. So that would be sort of my advice. It's a bit abstract, but I felt like it dovetailed in with Nicole's a little bit. I miss working with Nicole. I don't know if that's been clear to you.
Thank you. Jason.
I completely agree with what everyone just said, and Melanie, what you just said also, just about like kind of finding your group and tribe. I think especially for those that are BIPOC or diverse, it will feel less lonely if you can find that space of others like you, which I'm sure there is. And it may just be tougher to maybe find that first connection if you don't have one. So whether it's finding a mentor in the space, because in the end, I think while it may seem like maybe the world is not as diverse and it's very hard for you to land this project, or you're looking on media and you're not being represented, it also just oops, it looks like I froze. Oh, I'm back. It's only just that, you know, one project or that one person that you may meet that will kind of lead you to open to many doors. And I found that also, I think, in my career, where it kind of first started off in a path that I thought was pretty not so diverse in terms of general media and tech, but I kind of just followed through with my passion in music and let it guide me. And through amazing mentors and relationships I nurtured, now I'm in a record label where most people actually look like me. So it often takes, I think, a lot of patience and research and commitment. But what I really feel like that's different this time around than any other movement we've seen is this increase in allyship. Even for us, you know, in the Asian American community, I felt that many others and myself, like we kind of felt this, you know, this movement was also for allyship, for others, and really advancing this movement forward. So I feel like we're more connected than ever before in many ways. Although it seems like, you know, it's such a strange world, I'm actually very optimistic about what's to come in the next couple of years, forever being changed by this movement, and really kind of seeing change and actually taking action.
Thank you, Jason. Maheen?
So I love what everyone
just have a couple minutes left, sorry.
Oh, thank you. And to continue off with allyship, as soon as you have any type of power, if it's just to hire one other person or a writer you decide to collaborate with, I would really look at it through the lens of allyship. We cannot just be only working with people who look like us, who come from our same backgrounds. That is not true allyship. So really be purposeful and make sure that you, in your underrepresentation, are not homogenous.
Thank you. And Barbara, any final thoughts here?
I agree with,
by the way.
Oh, I agree with what everyone has said. Everyone has gained obviously some wisdom as a result of all of their specific experiences. And then we're going to continue to make more. Be prepared. We can still walk into rooms and we'll be the only one that looks like us that's in there. You know, take what you can from that, learn what you can from that, and utilize what you can for your craft, for your career, and take advantage of the situation in terms of what are you getting out of it. Look at it from another perspective in terms of the point of view. Not only, oh my God, this is what this room looks like, well, how are these people going to treat me? But what am I getting out of this to further where I need to be? What resources am I going to gain? Look at it from both sides. So, and do not be completely turned off if you walk into yet another room and you are the only one that looks like you in it. But keep in mind that you are in the room, and get what you need out of that to go on to the next project, to work with the people that you would like to work with, and to present the stories that you would like to present, and essentially either have your own studio or have input and feedback into larger projects, or opening up avenues so that people of color and underrepresented voices have the power to make decisions from the level, if whatever you consider to be the bottom to the top. We are all cogs. We are all cogs, and cogs that happen to be in mechanisms. So take advantage of what you can, continue to learn, and continue to expand your network so that you can continue to do what you would like. That's all I've got to say.
Thanks, Barbara. And thank you everyone for being here, and everyone out there viewing. For myself, I take from this that, a common thread of optimism out there was evident, and that the challenge is really finding your community and your allies. and that it will be harder than just showing up to the main white film and TV community, but we are out there, and we're inside there now, right?
Yeah.
And that's at the CBC, at LARC, at Telefilm, 88 Rising, Disney, Warner Media, and at BAF. It's a different world out there. It's a different landscape, and as you can see from our great guests here, we're doing great work. That there is a lot more out there, and this is an ideal time with the pandemic, but it's a different way to connect, and we got to use this like it's a good moment, a real moment. Thank you all.
Thank you. Let's stay in contact, everyone.